Well, here we go again. Some more of that good insanity in America. Today's lead story on Yahoo homepage: DOJ urged to press civil rights charges against Zimmerman. This would be the day after the acquittal of George Zimmerman by a jury of his peers. And here's what the story reads. The NAACP, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, and other civil rights activists are calling on the U.S. Department of Justice and Attorney General Eric Holder, and by the way, that is the very unbiased, very impartial Reverend Jesse Jackson. You know, the same Reverend who got together with Al Sharpton, let's see, what was that, at Duke University when 3 white boys were accused by a black woman of raping them, and then it turned out all to be a big lie. And then, you know, oddly enough, after that was over, they didn't apologize or make any attempt to, make things right. At any rate, Attorney General Eric Holder to press civil rights charges against George Zimmerman, the former neighborhood watchman, who was acquitted. Acquitted. That means he went before a court of law and was acquitted by a Sanford, Florida jury Monday in the shooting death of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. This is a quote. The most fundamental of civil rights, the right to life. You know, it's odd that this word right to life would be used here. And it's going to be said by the NAACP president, Ben Jealous. You know, if I recall, the NAACP is a liberal progressive group that supports abortion, which is, kind of against the right to life. To me, this is almost hypocritical for such words to fall out of this man's mouth. But let's read on with the quote. The most fundamental of civil rights, the right to life, was violated that night. George Zimmerman stalked, and then took the life of Trayvon Martin. NAACP President Ben Jealous, appropriately named, wrote in a letter to Holder shortly after the verdict was announced. We ask that the Department of Justice file civil charges against Mr. Zimmerman for this egregious act, or this egregious violation. Please address the travesties in the tragic death of Trayvon Martin by acting today. If there was a tragedy, it was that a young man lost his life because of his own actions, in being in a place where he shouldn't have been in the first place. A gated community where he didn't live, and a neighborhood watchman went after him. And when he attacked the neighborhood watchman, as proven in court, defended himself and had a broken nose and a bunch of blood all over the back of his head, and it took 27 or so stitches to stitch up the back of his head. And this case was proven in a court of law. But that's not good enough for these people, because they're not really seeking justice. They care nothing for justice. Isaiah chapter 59 will give you a little bit of insight into this. Now let's go to another quote. Farther down the page here. This verdict represents a tragic miscarriage of justice. Barbara Arnwine, president of the Washington, D.C. based Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, said in a statement, "Yet there is still a potential for justice to be served through a civil suit brought about by the by Trayvon Martin's surviving family members, and gee, I wonder if they will. And also through civil rights charges being brought against Mr. Zimmerman by the Department of Justice. Yeah, sure, go ahead, Mr. Holder, involve yourself in yet another scandal. When the Department of Justice goes against a courtroom of the United States of America, that means there's agenda here. Agenda. In other words, this man was taken into custody, been held in custody for a couple of years now, or since this event happened, had years taken away from his life, and he went before a jury of his peers and was acquitted of this crime. In other words, he was found not guilty of the crime of murder at all, or even second-degree murder. It was found that he was indeed defending himself. But that's not good enough for these people, because though they call themselves reverends and lawyers for civil rights, they're not interested in the law, and they're certainly not interested in justice. All they are interested in is their race. In other words, what you have here is racism in America, modern day. And I'm not saying reverse racism, because it isn't reverse racism. Racism is racism whether it's black or white. Let's read on. The Department of Justice launched a probe of the Zimmerman case earlier this year, but had no comment on Zimmerman's acquittal. Gee, I'll bet they didn't, after the scandals they've already been involved with, selling guns to Mexico and all this other stuff that Mr. Holder's been involved with. It's like a scandal every other day with him. Quote, if we find evidence of potential federal criminal civil rights crime, or of a criminal potential federal civil rights crime, we will take appropriate action, Holder said during a keynote speech to Al Sharpton's National Action Network convention. And at every step, the facts of the law will guide us. Yeah, I doubt that with regards to you, Mr. Holder. But Holder, the nation's first African-American Attorney General, cautioned in subsequent comments that there is a very high barrier when seeking to bring federal criminal charges in such cases, the Hill-Com noted. A Justice Department official told CNN late Saturday night that it continues to evaluate the evidence generated during the federal investigation, as well as the evidence and testimony from the state trial. On Sunday, Jackson, that is to say, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who also doesn't believe his son is guilty of the what was he convicted of? Stealing a whole bunch of money or embezzling, or I don't know, I forget. It's probably not important anyway, because it wasn't a white person that did a crime. So Jackson wouldn't be interested in that. On Sunday, Jackson called on the Department of Justice to intervene and take this to another level. Quote, I remain stunned at the decision, Jackson said on CNN's Noonday, that a grown man armed murdered a young boy going home. Yeah, going home through a neighborhood where he didn't live. A gated neighborhood in which the only way in was through a gate where you have to punch in a code, or to climb over the fence to get into the gated neighborhood. That's kind of strange, isn't it? Yet Jesse Jackson here is calling this man a murderer. I hate to say this in this way, but Mr. Jackson's true colors are showing here. And I don't mean the color of his skin. I mean the fact that he is a hypocrite and a racist himself. I don't care if he's walked arm in arm with Martin Luther King or whoever. He's clearly been poisoned by many things over the years, to the point that Now he doesn't care about justice. This man was acquitted in an American courtroom for these crimes. But you know what? I'll bet Mr. Jackson and Mr. Sharpton didn't think it was a travesty of justice whenever O.J. Simpson was acquitted. I mean, I bet they were right on board with that, even though he did kill a woman of another race. And, you know, there was a young man killed about 2 weeks ago when he pulled into a gas station to get gas, and 4 black youth stormed him, and he tried to get away from them, and they jerked him out of his car and threw him out onto a highway in front of an oncoming vehicle, and he was killed. Yet I haven't heard anything in the news about that being racist. And some of you may recall seeing the news several weeks back where a large black man went into this woman's home and beat her in front of her 2 children. Nobody claimed that that was racism. No charges were brought. Next quote. I think we must clearly move on to the next step in terms of the federal government and in terms of the civil courts, Sharpton said on MSNBC Saturday. Gee, MSNBC, what a bastion of objectivity. Clearly, we want the people disciplined, strategic. This is a slap in the face to those that believe in justice in this country. Why, Mr. Sharpton? Because justice was done? Because a man did not go to jail for not having really committed a crime? Again, what we see here is racism in America, modern day. Now, instead of the old KKK or the neo-Nazis, we've got the Reverends Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and many others. This man was put before a court in the United States of America justice system. He was acquitted by a jury of his peers and found to be not guilty. But that's not good enough. That's not good enough for these people because, like I said, they don't care about justice. They're not interested in justice. Again, read Isaiah 59 and you'll understand the mindset of these people. They're not worried about justice. They're not worried about equity. They're not really worried about equality. They're worried about notoriety and keeping the myth that racism is still just as bad in this country as it has ever been. Well, if it is because of people like this and the things that they have brought to bear.